let's get started by looking at the topics. We're going to be talking about running a good meeting, recruitment, review and evaluate, recommendations, and annual goals and task list. Some of these may be a little bit of a repeat from the training earlier, so we'll move forward quickly on some of these items unless there are lots of questions. So for running a good meeting, we'll start with that topic, and we're going to be talking about attendance, conduct, the content, rules, handling disruptions, and facilitation. So those are all items that are we comment on in our best practices document, page 26. Let me see if, yeah, okay. We have a slide on attendance here. This is an issue sometimes that comes up, and when I'll get calls or emails from staff or from the chairs of boards and commissions regarding not being able to get a quorum for their meetings. And so we have, just a lot of suggestions here in order to get your members there. So be intentional. Oh, okay. So yeah, it's number one here is remind your members. There are some people that need like 3 reminders, and they need them all in different ways. And so you email, you text, you make a phone call, and it just depends on the person. For some people, a phone call is what they really need. And for young people in particular, I notice there are some people that don't look at emails very much, or maybe, they might look at them randomly, but texts seem to work better. So just a combination of that. And, in the past, boards used to send the meeting packets by US mail to their members. So they had that hard copy. And I still like that hard copy personally. So some of your members might appreciate that as well. And that's also a reminder. I would usually, when I was on the Napa County board, I would take that packet, set it on the counter, so I would remember that I had a meeting. Then in terms of attendance, we also need to think about inviting other people to your meetings. So be intentional about inviting consumer and family member organizations representing diverse ethnic, cultural, racial populations, advocacy groups, and then county agencies, it just kind of depending on the topic for that meeting, reaching out to like housing or older adults, veterans, drug and alcohol, jail warden, and drug and alcohol is going to be incorporated into all your meetings now. So I'll be updating this slide. And then school district, law enforcement, community college, and patients' rights advocates. Oops. So when I say be intentional about inviting, for some, that means a phone call. Sometimes that means inviting the head of an organization to coffee and just connecting with them and asking, can we get you and maybe some of the folks that you serve to come to our meeting? Just trying to really reach out so that the groups feel welcome coming to your meeting. Or there are times that you might want to just set your meeting at their facility or at their building, and they're off, they might have a conference room where you could meet, and that way their folks will be comfortable coming to the meeting. In Napa County, we would set a meeting at a senior living area, and they had a community center where we could meet. And so the folks, the older adults that lived there would come and sit and participate in the meeting. And we would have speakers that addressed it, older adult mental health. This conduct slide we've gone through, so I'll move on. Content. So the agenda, we have a sample agenda on our website. So you can see, just some suggestions on what to put on the agenda. We want the public to understand, how public comment works. So it's good to put some information on the agenda. Some boards, they'll have kind of a general public comment at the beginning of the meeting where people can comment on items that aren't on the agenda, and then they'll provide an opportunity during those agenda items for people to comment. In some counties, they just do all of the public comment at the beginning of the meeting, and that's okay too, as long as you have public comment before or during the agenda item. And then speakers who can talk about the priorities that have been identified by the board members and concerns of the public. And, priorities that are identified by staff could be added to that as well. Access and effectiveness of services, needs, issues, and successes. And then housekeeping, keep it limited if possible. The public's there, the staff's there, your board members are there to talk about behavioral health trying to improve behavioral wellness for your community. So if possible, try to limit any kind of housekeeping things like organizational things like scheduling, that sort of thing, as much as possible. All right. Move my Zoom around. There we go. So we talked about the Brown Act already earlier, and I think I have some information on here in terms of the teleconference requirements and allowances. I'm not going to go through that today unless there is any strong interest or question. All right, so we'll move on to motion. A motion is a proposal to take an action. So since these are advisory boards, there's not a lot of motions that you need to be doing. If it's maybe accepting the minutes, that's a motion that usually happens. If you're going to be making a recommendation, that would be time to do a motion. There are some boards that seem to want to do lots of motions for just about everything. I would just say it's not, it's not necessary. It takes time to vote. And a lot of times people that, there's consensus on a lot of items and, you're just doing discussions mostly. So, be careful not to, try not to do too many motions. It's just not necessary usually. But yes, there's a question. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, this is Isabel with Kern County. I have a question regarding voting or the role that a board member will play if they decide that they're not able to attend one of our in-person regular meetings, but we end up sending them a link so that they could appear virtually. Based on what I've reviewed on our current bylaws, it seems that if the meeting itself is not solely virtual, then the board member appears as a public member, not as a voting member. So, is this something that is correct, or are they still able to vote if they post the location in which they're joining?
They're able to vote if they posted the location. Yeah, if their location is on the agenda and they're making it accessible to the public, they can vote. And you have to, if you have members that are voting or participating virtually, you have to do roll call vote.
Okay.
Okay. So the procedure is a motion. Sometimes a member will just say, I make a motion. But the chair can prompt it and say, do I hear a motion? And somebody will say, I make a motion, and they will be specific on what that motion is. Like, I make a motion to approve the minutes as presented, or I make a motion to approve the minutes with the amendments that we discussed, or the changes that we discussed. And then somebody will say, I second that. Or if you don't hear somebody say, I second that, the chair says, do I hear a second? And then hopefully somebody will second it. If necessary, a chair can make a motion and they can second it usually. Some boards may have parliamentary procedures that say they can't, but for the most part, most parliamentary procedures will allow the chair to do that. Although, as a chair, I think it's good to allow your members to make the motion in the second, because then you've got interest in that topic, and you're going to probably get closer to consensus with the vote. Discussion, a lot of times you're going to have had discussion on an item before you get to this point. But you can open it up for more discussion and see if there's anybody that had other things to say about an item before the vote is actually taken. It's also good to allow the public to provide comments either before the motion, if they had the chance, or if you think that they might have more comments, then at this point, you can allow the public comment period to take place again. And then vote. And not every member coming onto a board or commission understands what the word abstain means. Sometimes they think it means no. So it's good to just inform your new members that abstain means you're not voting. So people vote either yes, no, or they abstain. That means that they're not going to vote on that item. And then running a meeting, handling disruptions. I've been to some pretty disruptive meetings, and the advice that I would give the chairs is stay on agenda. Sometimes you might have a member of the public that is very angry. You are not supposed to be talking about their public comment. You should be staying on the agenda. So you're not supposed to be going back and forth with them for two reasons. One, the Brown Act, you don't want to be off topic to anything that you've published on your agenda. And you shouldn't be discussing those items, but also you can't move through your meeting if you're going to be going back and forth with people on topics that that the public might bring up, or a board member might bring up that may be off of your agenda. So stay on the agenda. So take your public comment. If somebody is upset about something, or there's something that needs to be considered in the future, that's fine. But don't dwell on it at that moment. Just move to the next item on the agenda. The action is in the reaction. So when I was in Dallas, Texas, I worked with community organizing, and we had some big issues with the public hospital, and they were trying to cut the budget. The board of supervisors, well, they didn't call it board of supervisors. They called it the county commissioners were trying to cut the budget for our public hospital during a time that people were waiting like 12 hours in the waiting room to get services. And we were not happy. The board of supervisors had appointed people onto the board of that public hospital who wanted to cut the budget. And they saw it as a taxpayer issue instead of a public health issue. And so they started having meetings behind closed doors, and they were not allowing the public to be part of that. So our community organizing group brought 80 people to their meeting. And another group came along too, and they were singing. And so we made a big impression on them. And they, so their reaction was to try to keep us out. So we made that action upon them because of their reaction. So instead of quietly moving on with their business, they couldn't do that. We pushed them and we were able to move in, and 4 of their board members resigned after that. And those were the ones that were acting like puppets of their board of supervisors. So I know the other side of it. I know how to get a reaction from a board. So I'm informing you on how to not get that reaction. So stay on agenda, stay within the rules, be open to the public, stay with good process. And then if something is really disruptive happening during a meeting, you stay silent and go on to the next person. You're polite with everybody and you're fair with everybody, but you do stay on agenda. And then ask for staff support as needed. The staff can speak, you know, the director, or, you know, maybe you have other leadership there at the meeting. The chair can look to the director if something's come up that really needs to be responded to directly to the person that made that comment. And, you know, they could go to the back of the room, or the director could say, I'll follow up with you, let me get your information. Or, you know, they could say, we will report back to you on this. Or, you know, they can decide how to handle something that needs to be handled in the moment. But you're an advisory board, so you should not be handling it if it's something that needs to be responded to by staff. Any questions? Okay. Running a meeting in terms of facilitation, just think about an accessible room, comfortable setup, access to water, especially in an Imperial County, because it's really hot there. It was 120 degrees when I visited last time. You know, make sure people know where the restrooms are, cell phones off if possible. And then during the meeting, timeliness, begin and end on time. The minutes should be accurate, you know, in terms of being a record of who was there and what the motions are. Everything else is great, you know, if other things can be captured that happened during the meeting, but the key things to include are the attendees and the motions. Public comment should be welcome before or during each agenda item, and then civility reigns. So, you know, back to conduct again. We want people to be able to work together well as a board and be really open to the public and listening. And we went through review and evaluate. So, and we've gone through recommendations. All right, recruitment. So let's see, we've talked about who needs to be on the board. In terms of strategies, Christine had talked about a little bit about strategies earlier, you know, to be intentional. When I was on the Napa County board, I set a meeting with our police chief, and then he signed up to be on the board. I set a meeting with the chair of our school board, and then he applied to be on our board. I reached out to a stakeholders advisory group because I was concerned about the diversity of our board, and was able to connect with folks in different sectors, ethnicity, race, culture, and LGBTQ in order to bring in more people in order to make our board reflect the community that was being served. So be intentional. Sometimes that takes a phone call, email, combination of both. Sometimes it takes sitting down and having coffee, but connecting with people, understanding what their interests are. And what you'll find out a lot of times is they will have either their own lived experience of behavioral health issues, family members' experience, certainly experience within the community. And connect, once they start connecting on that level, oftentimes they are interested in being on your board, or they'll know somebody that is. In terms of the process for recruitment, public posting of the openings is important. To be posted on the county website. A lot of counties have that set up where they'll show what the openings are and links to applications. This is a really specific board, so the application needs to be specific to the needs of your board membership. Let's see. Oftentimes the application is online, or there's just a phone number to call, and that's usually the administrative liaison to the board, so that they can provide an application. And in terms of what I've seen for process, it's usually like the chair of the executive committee where we get a chance to review applications. And since there are so many membership requirements, it's good for them to look at the applications as well as the administrative liaison and make sure that people are within the membership code. And then anybody that is qualified, we recommend that they be interviewed. Just a short interview, I think, is usually good, just like a half an hour with the same questions for everybody that's interviewed, just to get a sense of what their background and experience is and what issues they're concerned about in terms of behavioral health. And that will be also a way to vet people, because some people, they may be great advocates, but they're not going to be good team, like they won't be able to work together well with the board. And you can usually tell that in a half an hour. If somebody is just on a soapbox, you can tell if it may be an issue. So good to take that time to vet people. And then the folks that do that half-hour interview could recommend to the board that the board itself make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to appoint that person. Yeah, Denise, we need to get you a
what happens if this process is not followed? What are your recourses?
this is a suggestion.
So you don't have to follow this at all.
We're trying to just give you tools to understand good process.
Okay.
And then, we end this with the board is, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna kind of chime in and just say, we just recently had an interview like for an applicant. And so how we do it in Orange County is we have a nominating committee. So it was Carol and one of our members will meet with the person who provides an application to be on the board. They'll meet with them for about 30 minutes, and it's really just kind of going over the duties of the member and kind of getting to know the member and all that. Then after that, then we just kind of look at the application, and that would be me. I would go ahead and submit for an ASR, so it's like to get on the Board of Supervisors agenda. So I prepare all of that information and then it gets on their agenda. And then from there, then the Board of Supervisors will just, we'll have a board date and then they get the appointment.
So that's my question. Do you do that for everyone or do you pick and choose? I'm gonna do, this one gets an interview and this one doesn't. That's why I was
Okay.
asking, is this a process or is this a cherry picking thing?
No, so it depends. So we do receive several applications and then the nominating committee will look at it. It's not up to me, it's up to the nominating committee. We'll take a look at it. And so based on the whole diversity of the board too, we want to make sure that we're looking at, like, do we have enough from like this, this population, so we want to make sure that we are a diverse board. So again, same thing, we take a look at it. So for example, we were lacking Latinos on our board. And so we were like, okay, we really need to reach out to our Latino population and try to get them and be objective. And so we did that. We started going to like, they had like health fairs in like more Latino oriented like areas. And so we try to reach out to try to get them to be on the board. And so we did find somebody who was Latino who, and that was the last application that we received. But again, same thing, being objective and trying to fill the different seats that are vacant. And then also, taking that in mind that we want a diverse board.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Dr. Monica Caffey, San Bernardino County Chair. It's interesting because the Board of Supervisors in our county are the one who select the commissioners that are appointed. The applications go directly to the board clerk of their office. And so we're not even aware of who it is until our first meeting. We have been working with the director as well, and I'm going to revisit this because I know that with the new, legislation being passed with Prop 1, we have to be diligent to make sure we're now getting someone from the local education as well as a youth, and they would need feedback from us to do that. But currently, the actual commission doesn't have any input in regards to who's appointed. They notify me once it's there, and then the department does the orientation and I make sure that I'm present. That hasn't been the historically the way it was, but that has changed over the past 4 years.
I find it, Christine Hatia, I find it really interesting how different counties work so differently. I mean, in our county, yes, the applications all go to the clerk of the board, but the clerk of the board forwards them all to the chair of the behavioral health board. And, we do recruiting for special things, but we review and interview everybody who applies, because sometimes, you may have a gap in something, but the best candidate in terms of passion and perceived willingness to work may not be exactly that person that you're seeking. So it's kind of a real balance to try to keep it representative. And we work really hard. We look at our county demographics in terms of ethnicity and race and age, because it's all such a big balancing act. And we take this whole representativeness very seriously. So, but we do interview everybody,
Yeah, we have one more comment, I think. Moving mics.
Yes, this is Bill Stewart from San Diego County, and over last 7 years, our chair gets all the applications and reviews it, but I've noticed depending on who's the chair and their perspective and focus, depending on how well, what the direction the board goes into, because some chairs are more have different opinions and views. So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you all. I appreciate getting the input, and how it's working. I think the key is to try to be fair and have the same process for everybody if possible. And we even, when I was on the Napa County Board, I don't know if they're still doing this, but we would even, when somebody's term was coming up, we would go through the process with that person as well. So our members would interview them again and decide whether or not to make recommendations. And that can be helpful, to review and make the recommendations for everybody, no matter if they've been a member or not, just to help with your diversity, but also just, sometimes you have members that are very difficult and you don't want the Board of Supervisors to rubber stamp those members to continue on your board.
Check their social postings.
Good point. Yeah, little bit of investigative work, right? Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I don't know if we're gonna put that in our best practices, but okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Tisha, one of the things that I haven't over the training seen, in regards to the processes is the, concern around if there's ethical matters that are occurring with a commissioner, how the commission addresses those ethical dilemmas. We normally don't have a recourse in the bylaws or anything in the training that addresses what what our scope is to do in handling a circumstance if, like you said, something comes up where a commissioner does something that is outlined of the ethical trainings. It can be a very bad look on the commission as that person being there, with anything. And so we don't have, or have never had anything address that, and had been wondering, is there anything around the training that can be incorporated around ethical issues? Yes, we have the training, but what do you do when it happens? We don't know as a commission, do you go to the supervisor, the chair of the supervisor? Do you go to the director? There's nothing that guides us on that.
Okay. Yeah, if it's, we're talking, what ifs here.
That's right.
And if it's something, as chair, you have to decide, is this something that makes you really uncomfortable for this person to continue on your commission? And if that's the case, then you need to, I would start with the Board of Supervisor liaison to your board and have a conversation with them. And, the Board of Supervisors can take people off of your commission. And certainly, I haven't heard of circumstances where people have done ethical things like that. I mean, because we're doing advisory work, that I haven't heard examples of this before where somebody ethically needed to be taken off. But I would think the Board of Supervisors would probably be on board with you.
Right.
And, because you are their,
Right.
you're their advisory board, so they want, you reflect on them. Yeah.
I had this situation. I
Oh.
called the supervisor who appointed him, said, Scott,
Really? So they took him off?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And a quick comment, in San Diego County, every board member represents their district. So if there's an ethical thing going on, I represent District 1. Oh, and this is Bill Stewart's side. I represent District 1 and she's the chair for the supervisors. So if I did something ethically questionable, it represents her. So that is a deterrent and a powerful way that she's gonna react and act cause action on it because I'm assuming she's gonna want to be reelected. Yeah.
Yeah, we had, in Napa County one time, we had a member who had decided that he wanted to be doing drugs and alcohol, and he had, I think it was bipolar or schizophrenia. So it was really impacting his behavior during the meetings, that he was, using whatever drugs. And he was having very active delusions during the meetings that he wanted to share with us. And so it wasn't productive to our board. And I asked the board to vote, our bylaws say that 2/3 vote, we can remove a member. And the membership was not willing to, they voted, they did not vote in support, so we didn't get that 2/3 majority to remove him. He just finally stopped coming, and I asked him by text, are you resigning? And he finally said yes. But people do not want to do that to other people. They don't want to add to people's depression or, that sort of thing, I think. So it's difficult for the board itself to do that. Yes. So, yeah, as much as you can, if it's not something that you think the Board of Supervisors need to get involved with, it's good to have a one-on-one conversation with the member and, just talk with them about the issue outside of the meeting and see if it can get resolved. And also, sometimes you might have members that really do kind of monopolize during a meeting. And that's another area where the chair can be helpful in connecting with that person between meetings. And, just, I would take an hour here and there and just listen to that member offline, so they understood that we were listening to them, try to figure out how to direct the concerns that they had within the ways that, the tools that we have as a board. But just taking that time outside of a meeting can help with making the meeting flow better if you have somebody that's really talkative. Member orientation is really important. So when you're bringing on a new member, you could use one of the training we had this morning, just pull up those slides and go through what are the duties, what are the membership requirements, just understand what the role of the board is. And maybe give them a copy of your bylaws and your calendar. Brown Act requirements. People are not born knowing the Brown Act. That's something that we all have to remind ourselves about. There's a lot of requirements that are very different being on a public board. And then showing them your past work, like your most recent annual report, can be a good way to show people how the board works, And then on our website, we have some 15-minute modules that just kind of help people review and check their understanding of the duties or the Mental Health Services Act. We have on our resources page, there's a link to sample documents, and we have annual goals / task list document. In terms of annual goals, that can really help guide your commission in terms of what they prioritize for speakers and site visits and ad hoc committees, research, help them focus on topics. Because there's so many different interests, and if you maybe once a year, just take the time to listen to your board members and identify what are the top, maybe 2 or 3 areas that we really want to focus on this year. Where's the energy that can be helpful? Yeah, Christine?
I just wanted to step back a second because you were talking about member orientation and
Yes.
past work. I like to take our annual report to interviews because it not only lays out what our goals are, but all the things we did and sort of like, this is what our expectations are, so that people know if they're really interested in being on the board. It's like not just to have it on your resume, it's like to do some real work. So I find that to be a really good document to even forward to people prior to
That's a good
interviewing
idea.
them.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Bill?
This is Bill Stewart from San Diego County, and I was just wanting to mention about what you just mentioned about goals and tasks. What we do in San Diego County for the executive committee, we have the planning calendar. Anytime we bring up the calendar, all our goals and our focus for the year is part of that. So it's right in front of us,
Right.
and we plug in things to fulfill our goals and try to achieve
Mhm.
what the board as a whole wants to.
That's good. Yeah. We have 3 bullet points under annual goals here. And it's kind of parallels what Christine was talking about, that it's always good to review what are your mandated responsibilities when you're setting your goals, just to remind your members and the leadership what are those duties that are laid out in code. And then identify specific goals, like what sites do you want to visit that year? What kind of participation do you want from your board members? And then priority issues, like we talked about, identify like 1 to 3 areas of special focus. You have to kind of gauge where is the energy. For some of your board members, just coming to 1 board meeting a month is what they can do, and that's it. But for some of them, they really want to roll up their sleeves, work on issues. They're okay with multiple meetings and site visits, and they really want to get involved. And that's where the energy is. So you need to understand, who has the energy, and that needs to match up with the goals that you set, because those will be the people that do the work. And then the task list that we have is it's just a long list. I mean, we're just giving you an example of all the things to think about. If you have an administrative liaison, or maybe one of your executive committee members, or both, it's great to calendar some reminders so you remember which month you want to do nominations. So you fill your executive committee seats, and oftentimes the boards will have 1 month for nominations, and then next month they'll hold their elections. Maybe calendar when the annual report needs to be worked on and when it will be finalized. And then we have a listing of ongoing tasks, like setting up agendas, creating kind of a listing of which sites that have been decided to visit for that year, and what months, and who's going to do the site visits. And then training. Those are ongoing, just because you're going to have new members coming on the board, throughout the year. So just providing training to them. All right, so we made it to the end of the slides. Are there any questions?